Okay, so let's get into the second deal. Um, so just to start off with, we'll start with the grip. So usually it is done in a mechanics grip like so, and you would take the second card like so. However, the way I do it is from my bottom deal grip. And the reason behind that is because I don't want to switch grips every single time I do a different type of deceptive deal. And I believe that is something that everybody should do. They should do all of their deals, fair and unfair deals, with one grip. Because if we think about it, we don't want to go from regular dealing, and then if you want to do a bottom deal, you change your grip to bottom deal grip to do your bottom deal, and then you change it back to do your second deal. We want to keep all of our deals looking the same. So if anybody is, obviously scrutinizing us, they're not going to see that discrepancy at all. So that is just something that I encourage you guys to think about, and I will be teaching my second deal from the bottom deal grip, if that makes sense. I do all of my fair deals like this. I do all of my bottom deals like this. I do my Greek deals like this, center deals like this. I do all deals from the bottom deal grip. So let's get on into the mechanics of the second deal. So essentially what is happening is we are taking the second card out from under the top card whilst making it appear like we are taking the top card fairly. And this can be advantageous in a card game. For example, if you know the card on top, let's say I have another 9 in my hand and I need this 9 and I know that this 9 is on top, I can deal to all the other people, and then once I get to me, I can fairly deal myself that 9. And then a little bit of foreshadowing, this also leads into a can, which is the can that I do, which uses a second deal and or a bottom deal. It just depends on how I do it in that circumstance. And I'll be teaching that really soon. So stay tuned for my 8-can tutorial. So back to mechanics. So what we're going to do, we're going to have our deck in our bottom deal position. So it's going to be the top right corner is going to be on our middle finger here, and then the bottom left corner is going to be like in the clutch of our palm, right? So just like this. Now it'll be the exact same thing as if we were in our mechanics grip. So just get whatever grip that you're using, and then you can follow along that way. So the really, really basic, what we're going to do is our thumb is going to be pushing over the top corner like so. And then our taking thumb is going to strike this card here and pull it out. Simultaneously, while this card is being pulled out, our thumb that pushed over the top card is going to be pulling it back. So we don't have the discrepancy of this here, because obviously this looks like exactly what we're doing. And oh, by the way, if you do have a card like this is called a hanger. Same thing in a bottom deal. If you were to take it and it didn't take, this is called a hanger. Okay, so the way we make this deceptive is with the motion. And we want this marriage of movements here. And this is how we're going to be taking the cards. We don't want to have all the movement be in just one hand. So we don't want this. And we don't want this. We want to both come together evenly to take that card, like so. And when we do come together, we want to tilt up the deck towards their eye line. So when we take the card like so, that part will stay hidden. Because obviously if we're tilting the deck like this is very obvious to what we're doing. And then we will also later talk about the size of the brief that you want. This is a very controversial topic, the size of the brief, which is basically the size of the space where you're going to take the card from. So what we really want to get used to is this marriage of movements here. And the easiest way to practice that is to deal fairly and just conjoin your hands in this movement here. Because also similar with the dealing grip, we don't want to deal one way and then all of a sudden when we deal seconds, we're like this. We want everything to be nice, continuous, and smooth. So by the time we switch from one deal to another, it seems like we're still dealing fairly. So, little recap. We're gonna push our card, our top card over like so. Our thumb, the side of our thumb kind of, is gonna come in and take that card. And then at the same time as the card is coming out, our thumb with the card that is on top is pulling this card back. So by the time it's out, this card is already back flush with the deck. So once we get this motion down, we really want to work on the marriage of movements and make sure that we're both evenly using both of our hands like this to come together. I mean, you don't have to like be like this. You don't want to be like, that flaunty, but you want to make sure that you're coming together like so. And then make sure that you can also do that going around a card table. So we're like this in the movement, if that makes sense. So you're not just like this. You want to make sure you're getting that marriage of movements there. And it also plays into the bigger motion will cover the smaller motion of you taking the second card. You're coming together like this. That will also help in your bottom deals, your center deals, your Greek deals, all of your false deals and such. That marriage of movements will really help you disguise the move like so. Okay, so on to the size of our brief. And just to remind you, the brief is just this space here. Traditionally, it was thought that you need like a really teeny brief, and then you could just grab that card and then you're just going like this, doing your second deal. However, I have found that people will deal fairly and then they come to do a second deal and then they're all just like this, doing like a really small brief. And it's like it's really intense and it doesn't look very like smooth, especially when you compare it to their fair deal, which is a lot more open. That is why my second deal is very open, very soft, if you will. And that's because that's the way I deal. It's just very fairly, very soft. So when I do a second, I want to make sure that I'm, doing the exact same thing. And also it just allows you to go a lot slower, and that is also more deceptive than coming in and doing like a really fast and really small brief. So, and also I will say this, messiness will be your friend. If you act like you don't care and the deck is just all over the place like this and you're doing your deals, it's gonna feel more fair than you trying to be super controlled, super tight, and trying to get your second deal perfect every single time, if that makes sense. I believe Daniel Madison calls this the soap theory, that you can disguise a lot of deception in the messiness or the dirtiness of the way you're handling cards. And also, just as a general rule, you don't really want to be flaunting, if you will, your skill with cards, because in the magical moment, that's just going to be their explanation that they backtrack to, which is, oh, they're just good with their hands or whatever. And you really don't want that. You want, the moment to be of the magic, not of the skill of the magician, or the performer, should I say. So don't be afraid to be, loose, very airy, very light, and don't worry about your brief being very small, because in this marriage of movements, you're tilting your hand back anyway, and by the time you're back forward, the card is already out and this is already back in the front, flush with the deck. So no one's going to see that unless they're standing directly behind you, or obviously like you have an overhead camera, which hopefully you don't, and hopefully if you do have an overhead camera, you're not trying to cheat. This is more for performance. I do not recommend cheating at an actual card game with any move, no matter how good you are, but that will be your prerogative. So anyway, so we want this marriage of movements here, like so. We want to keep things really light, really fair. We want to make sure we're tilting up that deck to their eye level. And then we don't really care about how big the brief is. I mean, obviously we don't need to like make it huge, but like 1/2 inch to a little more should be what you're aiming for. And that just feels like you're taking them really fairly, because usually when you take a card like this, you're not, pushing over just a teeny bit. You're generally pushing it over a lot more than that. So it makes sense to push it over a significant amount. So you can take that card. And then if you think about it, it makes the deception even better when you push it over, not that much, but when you push it over significantly. And then when you take it, this card is already back. So obviously the card that you pushed over had to be the card that you just took. So it just acts as another convincer that you are taking the top card. Okay, so we have our mechanics down. A little bit of some tips before we get on to how to practice this. We want to keep everything really light. We don't want to be putting a lot of pressure anywhere with our hands. One, that just adds unnecessary tension, and it makes it seem like, you're trying to keep control of the deck. And the more we can act like we do not care about something, the less our audience is going to focus on the dirty moment or the sleight that we're doing. Okay. Another tip I have is there is a distinct sound, which is like this kind of like scraping sound that you get with the second deal, because the card is rubbing between two cards. And the way I disguise that is not necessarily disguising the way I do the second deal, but disguising the way I deal fairly. And usually when people do fairly, they just take the card like so. What I do is I like to take it and then kind of like scrape it against the side of that card so it makes this noise. So when I do a second deal, it makes a similar noise. So I'll do seconds and then fairs so you can see the difference here. The sound sounds a lot similar to each other. So then you don't have that sound discrepancy if someone is like listening closely or in a quiet environment or something like that. And it also really helps when you're doing a bottom deal too, because the bottom deal makes that noise as well. So I just disguise that by making sure to scrape that card whenever I'm dealing fairly. So the audience is already used to that noise. Now, on to practicing tips. So the best way to practice is at first to make sure you have your mechanics down. So just repeat this motion over and over again until you get all the way through the deck. And then once you have that nice and solid, get onto the marriage of the movements, like so. Make sure you're bringing both of your hands together like this. And then also practice that with your fair dealing as well, and make sure you're doing that when you're dealing fairly. Next thing to do is alternate between fair and second deals. It doesn't really matter which one you start with. So we'll just start with the fair deal and then do a second deal and fair deal, second deal, and so on. And this is just going to make sure that you can switch between each one. And then you can do like every third, every second, every fourth. So you do fairly, and we're doing every third one. I guess technically every fourth one. And this is going to help you if you have like a game, for example, and you actually are, so for example, we have the 4 on top and we want it to come to us. You can do 1, 2, 3, 4, and then ours is going to be that fourth one right there. And then I would also make sure you're practicing doing it like so around the table, just to make sure that you're comfortable moving your arms around, and you can still do all the things that we talked about, the marriage of movements and all of that. Now, probably one of the best ways to conceal the second deal is having a borderless deck. So this is an edge deck, so you can obviously, you see this white border. However, if we break out a borderless deck, you can see that the design on the deck goes all the way to the border. and that will help disguise that second deal a lot better. So I'll give you an example here. Even with the overhead camera, it is very hard to see that second deal, like so. I'll turn that card face up so you can see if I have it close here. You can see the difference. I'll turn it down again so you can see that. So yeah, that is the second deal. Just a quick little tutorial on how I do the second deal. Please let me know if you guys have any questions down below in the comments, and let me know what other sleight of hand techniques you guys would like to learn. And go ahead and start practicing this, because it'll be part of my 8-can tutorial, which is I'll have a bunch of different ways of doing the 8-can with different second deals, different bottom deals, even a Greek deal, which if you didn't know what a Greek deal was, it is dealing the second from the bottom card. So for example, Ace of Diamonds, and get your Greek deal prepared, just like that. You said we still have that King, and the Ace of Diamonds is there. So go ahead and look forward to that, and happy practicing.